Alright, toy fans, welcome back to the Spectra Creative channel. Here is the DC Director's Commentary I think a lot of you have been waiting for. Our San Diego Comic-Con 2010 item, Gleek and the Wonder Twins. Or the Wonder Twins and Gleek, or, well, maybe just the Wonder Twins. Let's dive in. So, to start off, we had some very specific marching orders for creating Comic-Con items for this year. Essentially, we had transformed the Mattel Comic-Con experience from a very kind of passive to an active experience for the fans. One big thing is we had Matty Collector going, which was our website. At the time, it's now defunct, but at the time it was basically distributing monthly DC, He-Man, Ghostbusters product to fans. And management saw this as a great thing for the company, but they wanted to make sure Comic-Con could remain special, now that we basically had Comic-Con every month with Matty Collector, essentially. So they wanted all of the items we were creating for Comic-Con to be a little bit different, in the idea that they would have a version for Matty and a version for Comic-Con. So for Masters of the Universe that year, we did Orko and Prince Adam, and the Orko figure was different for the show. At the show, if you put him in a glass of water, or used a hairdryer, or just put him out in the sun, he would change color and go kind of invisible, if you will. Not totally invisible, but, you know, more or less change color. So that was great for Masters of the Universe. For DC, we had the same marching orders. Find a way to make the item special for the show, because it was also going to be available on Matty Collector after the show, which we didn't have Matty Collector in previous years. So the Comic-Con item was just the Comic-Con item. Now, you know, again, Matty Collector items, it's like every month you were getting a Comic-Con item, more or less, or at least you were getting figures developed for collectors, as opposed to only at Comic-Con, which you get a collector figure. The previous year, we had done Lobo for our DC Universe Classics item, and this was essentially because Lobo had previously been off the table. He was looked at as too violent, too adult, he smoked, he drank, he cursed. So doing him for Comic-Con was special because he was not a figure we could do at retail at the time. Now, I think people could do him at retail. He's shown up in Imagine X and stuff. But at the time, he was considered a little bit off limits, so doing him for Matty Collector and for Comic-Con was a great way to celebrate DC and go sort of one step above what we were regularly doing for DCU. So Bill Beneke and I, Bill being the handsome gentleman here who was the lead designer for Mattel, he and I were essentially partners on the DC brand, along with the Horsemen who were doing the sculpting, of course. Don't want to leave them out. And we would spend a lot of time thinking, who could we do for the DC Universe Classics figure for Comic-Con that would be special now that we were doing figures, you know, really deep diving? And I don't remember which one of us brought it up. I'm going to say Bill, because Bill is usually always the one bringing this stuff up. But my memory, you know, doesn't remember every tiny detail. But I'm going to give him all the credit. So the Wonder Twins were brought up, and we were thinking, yeah, you know what? That actually would be a really great theme for a Comic-Con item. At the time, they'd never had a toy before. They were very niche. They were very collector-friendly. They were, you know, from the 80s, from the Super Friends show. You know, I mean, so many people in pop culture also knew the whole, you know, Wonder Twin Powers Activate line. That was their signature call to action that activated their powers, quite literally. So it really fit the bill in terms of an item that would be for DC Universe Classics that, you know, if you will, wouldn't work at retail in the sense that we plussed it up in a nice package, but would really draw a lot of publicity for it at the show. And, of course, there's the whole issue with Gleek, and we're going to get into that in a moment. Bear with me. Let's talk about the main item first. So here we are developing a Wonder Twins item for the show, and, again, it was the very first time, unless I'm mistaken, that they'd been done as toys. There's been toys since then, of course. There's been quite a few, but, again, I'm sure someone in the comments can point me wrong, but if my memory is correct, the Mattel DC Universe Classics set was the first ever Wonder Twins toy. They never had a figure in the Superpowers line back in the day. I think they were planned for the line, but it never actually came out. So that was another thing that made it really special was, you know, doing this as like a first time ever toy. and doing it not, is a 1970s figure like this Mego execution, if you will, that came out a few years later, but doing it, in 6-inch fat form factor, highly articulated, would fit right in with the DCU classics, and it was minimal tooling because you really had like heads, belts, gloves, and collars, more or less. So you didn't have to do a whole new body. They could use the basic body sculpt, which really did help because we were always looking for cost-effective ways since Comic-Con items had much lower runs compared to retail. So everything came together in what was an amazing box presentation. The packaging is still one of my favorites we've ever done. And it's one of the few DCU Classics items I still have a packaged sample of. It had amazing original art on the back. It showcased both figures and all their accessories on the front. It had a slipcase that you would pull off the top that would keep it kind of dust-free, as well as a shipper box so that, you could basically keep it forever and it wouldn't get damaged, etc. So there was a lot of elements to the package between the shipper box and the slipcase, and then the fold-out diorama packaging that when you pushed it to either side, it showed the two Wonder Twins doing their Wonder Twins thing, their heroic pose, touching their arms. They're not their arms, but their fists. And it came loaded with accessories. So, we had the water bucket, we had, which, came right from the show, form of water. That tended to be one of the go-to forms. So I don't know where the water bucket came from. It was like he was turning into water, but somehow he could also make a bucket. That really doesn't make sense, but I'm not going to get into Super Friends continuity here. And then, of course, the eagle, which would then carry sometimes Gleek or just carry the water bucket, and that kind of became one of the Wonder Twins, I guess, signature moves, their signature attack. So since we had a Zor in our Motu Classics line, we could easily repaint the Eagle Zor into traditional Eagle colors, and now we had our Eagle for the Wonder Twins. So it was great. We basically had very little tooling, and because of the low run, that was going to work. It sort of checked off that box. And adding Gleek as, a little bit of tooling there, we had our Wonder Twins set. And to top it off, it had lights and sounds. When you opened it up and touched the two sides together, you got the actual Wonder Twins from the show saying, "Wonder Twin powers, activate!" And lights would flash, and I think there were 3 different, sayings they said. Form of water, shape of an eagle. And if I recall, there were 2 others. I don't actually have it right in front of me. It's on my toy shelf. But that was the set. And then you see down there, there's Gleek the Monkey in a little baggie. The Gleek the Monkey in a baggie that infamously caused a lot of frustration for fans. And I want to give some background on that. Why in the world would we put Gleek the Monkey in a Ziploc, in a poly bag, and hand him out only at the show? Were we bananas? Oh my gosh, that was a terrible pun, but I found this image, and so, I couldn't help myself. What can I say? I'm a punny guy. So, yeah, why did we distribute Gleek like that when, Gleek was arguably just as popular as the Wonder Twins and also part of the team? It was basically, Jan, Jaina, Zaina, and Gleek. It was all of them together, the 3 of them, even though, twins are 2 people, but Gleek was their sidekick, and, he was a sidekick that really completed it. So let's give some framework. So long ago, not, long ago in a galaxy far away, but just long ago, as in previous to, say 2009, 2008, there was no Matty Collector. And that's really important. As I said in the beginning of this video, because of Matty Collector, we were essentially producing collector-level product every month. Previously to Matty Collector, the only way to get Mattel collector-level product in the action figure category, more or less, was at San Diego Comic-Con. For example, this 2000X Masters of the Universe He-Man figure of Keldor. Not He-Man figure, He-Man being the brand, Keldor being the figure, Skeletor, the guy transformed into Skeletor. The point is, it's Keldor. And the only way you could get Keldor was at the show. And that was a toy specifically made for adult collectors. The same goes for She-Ra. And I know I'm using 2 Motu examples, but they kind of make the point. I mean, She-Ra is a major character in the Masters of the Universe brand. I mean, she's pretty much, number 2, number 3 as far as the heroes go, in the whole brand, and the only way to get her was at the show. There was no Matty Collector, there was no after the show sales online. So that brings us back to Gleek. So we have this sculpted Gleek from the Four Horsemen, and as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we had those marching orders from management to find a way to make the San Diego Comic-Con item different from the one that was going to be on Matty Collector now that we had Matty Collector. Previously, nobody was upset if you just made She-Ra at Comic-Con because there was no other way to get her. I mean, of course, there'd be people upset they couldn't get her, but the idea was these items were supposed to work as a PR machine. They were supposed to draw attention to the brand, to the Comic-Con booth, to the company, and that was the whole idea. So doing Gleek only at the show, not including him in the package, but only handing him out to people who bought the figure at the show and not making him available on Matty Collector was all deliberate and part of the PR machine. If you will, to quote Oscar Wilde, there's only one thing in life worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about. Not only is this one of my favorite quotes of all time, but I think it really sums up what was going on here. As I said, She-Ra was only available at the show, and of course there's fans that are upset that she wasn't sold at retail, but think about it. If she wasn't sold at the show, there was no She-Ra at all. It was like the show created extra SKUs, extra slots, to offer additional figures beyond what you could do at retail. So while people might complain She-Ra or Keldor are not available at retail and only at the show, well, at least, if you will, that's something. Without the show, that you wouldn't get them at all, period. So the same kind of goes with Gleek. If it wasn't for San Diego Comic-Con, we wouldn't have been able to do Gleek, period. He wasn't going to work in the retail line because he was such a big sort of sidekick character, mini character. He would fit in the package or fit cost-wise into a regular figure set. Another great example from the world of DC is the JLU Solomon Grundy. He was never sold at retail. He wouldn't fit into a retail pack. He was way bigger. The only way to get Solomon Grundy in the Justice League line was at the show. There were no post-show sales. There was no Matty Collector. This is how you got him. Again, same with She-Ra. If you wanted to get She-Ra, you had to go to the show. So this was why Gleek and why Orko were done as something different for the show. I get that it didn't work for everyone. I'm not trying to say this was a perfect solution. But what I'm trying to say is that within the context of the previous years, and I'm saying like previous 7 years worth of Mattel San Diego Comic-Con items going all the way back, that was it, I get that something available at the show is not fair to those who can't make it to the show. But putting yourself in the shoes of someone who does go to the show and spends all that money on a hotel and travel and tickets, it's a lot of effort. It's way more effort now, I get it, than it even was 10 years ago when you could just walk up and buy a pass and walk in the door. But the point is, I get it. I get that it's not fair. But the goal was not to be fair to everyone. And I take responsibility. I mean, this was my call. I mean, granted, I was following, I had my request, my marching orders, or my request, if you will, to find a way to do this, my marching orders, to find a way to make something different for the show. And yes, I absolutely take responsibility. I was the one who made the call to make Gleek only the show. Because we were also asked to do something dynamic, something that would make headlines, something that would draw attention to the brand, and really be the talk of Comic-Con. And honestly, succeeded in that. I think the GLEEK and Wonder Twins set stole the show as far as toy exclusives at the show that year, and that satisfied what management directly asked me to do. Again, I have to answer to my bosses. I'm an employee. And when they say, get headlines with your figure, then I need to do that, and I need to find a way to do that. And Gleek the Monkey, available only at the show, succeeded in doing that. Yeah, I get it. It was a rock and a hard place. There was no way to please everyone in this case. And even as a collector myself, and I think everyone knows I am a collector as well as someone in the industry, I get why it's frustrating when you can't get a figure and when it's only at the show. But with the goal of getting headlines, finding a way to make the show version special for those who go to the show, now that we had Matty Collector, You know, back before, it was different. There was no Matty Collector. You were going to anger fans. Absolutely. I mean, we knew going in that would happen, but we also knew that we had, you know, very specific requirements for how to do this. And, you know, you were never going to please everyone. And our goal was to make the best possible item we could. I'm really proud of the set. I think it came out great. You can now get Gleek really cheap, too, on eBay. So enough years have passed that you can pick them up for like 20 bucks, I think. So, hey, everyone wins in the end. You just got to be a little patient. I hope people like the Wonder Twins. I'm so proud of the set. Frank Varela did an amazing job on the package, the Horseman on the sculpt, Bill on the character design. This was a team effort, and it's still one of the proudest items we've done. Come back next time, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled wave-by-wave review, now that we're through one of the best and maybe the most controversial DCU Classics Comic-Con items. But hey, again, 20 bucks on eBay, maybe 30. It's definitely come down in price. You can get your Gleek.